In episode 77 of Greenhorn Gardening, 3 tips for growing kale, and for the growing tip, seed storage advice for the 2013 growing season. So, welcome to greenhorngardening.com. I'm Damon, and I'm on a mission to help you grow your own vegetable garden. So, definitely go on over to greenhorngardening.com/claim to get your free download on the right way to make and use organic fertilizers. Guys, guess what? I have had an idea that I've been wanting to try for well over a year now, and actually it's been less than a year. It's been more like 6 months maybe. I've been wanting to do some sort of a contest and some sort of a grow off or some such thing. And those of you who listened last week to episode 77 with the talk with Darla from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, I was at one point I was asking her about, you know, giant pumpkin seeds. Does she have any giant pumpkin seeds? And so I'm trying to kind of flesh out this whole pumpkin grow off thing, and how I might do it, have first prize, second prize, third prize, and I'm trying to flesh that out. So, you know, honestly, it would definitely be something not so much on weight, but on just sheer bulk and size, and you know, the circumference of the pumpkin. So I'm thinking about doing like a pumpkin grow off, but I just kind of need some help with that, and I'm not quite sure how to put it together. And if those of you have some ideas of what would be some good prizes, or what would be a good way to go about it, to do it, especially because it all have to be online, right? Everyone would have to submit photos, but I'll kick that idea around some, but be sure to just contact me there and let me know what you guys think about that. And definitely Damon at greenhorngardening.com is my email, and also to Twitter at Damon at Greenhorn Damon at Twitter, or on Twitter. Just, you know, that's the Twitter. That's the Twitter ID, and it's Greenhorn Damon. And then, of course, on YouTube, you can just contact me via Greenhorn Gardening. You know, you can just shoot a message directly that way. So those are the ways to do it. So let me know what you guys think. You know, but anyway, just thinking, here we are at the beginning of the new year, and I'm just beginning. I think the first episode of Greenhorn Gardening was on January 29th of 2009, I think that's right. And so this is like essentially almost a 3-year anniversary, and it's kind of hard to believe that it's going to be 3 years as of next Tuesday or so. And so I was like, my gosh, it's been 3 years. We've been doing it for 3 years. It's kind of hard to believe. And so I thought that it might be good to kind of just share the Greenhorn Gardening story, or how I got started with it, and how I, you know, do it, and just kind of where everything is now, where you know, just let you know where we come from, where we are, and you know, where we might, you know, want to go, and just and so I remember just, you know, I was working a day job, still working that same day job, and hopefully we'll be able to get out of that, but you know, just came home one day. It was a rough day at work, I think, or it may have been a rough week, and you know how that goes, right? You know, just, you know, and I thought, what if I lost my job? You know, what if just the place just closed down, or downsizing, or you guys know all the crazy stuff that goes on out there now. What if, you know, what if I lost my job? And as I was walking through the yard, I said, well, maybe I ought to learn how to grow something. You know, maybe I ought to learn how to grow my own food, or grow my own garden. And that's essentially what started Greenhorn Gardening. Was I just had that idea, and I went out and just kind of got online and tried to look for some basic information on growing, and bought a very popular book. You know, Mel Bartholomew's Square Foot Gardening. Read that book like a couple of times and said, okay, I'm gonna go do this, you know. So I read that book and was fascinated by it, and still I think it's a great simple method for getting started. But the thing that I did not have was I didn't have all the different sources of compost that he recommended. I just didn't have it. It just wasn't available in my area. And so the compost that I did get was, although had plenty of microbial life, there just wasn't enough nutrition. And so I went out and planted my first square foot garden, and everything failed, you know. I guess you can't really call it a square foot garden, because I didn't do it exactly the way he said, because it wasn't, you know, I didn't have everything. You know, I know he recommends the coarse vermiculite, and the only thing that was available in my area was medium vermiculite. It was the medium and the small, right? That's all that was available. That kind of makes things crusty, and it's not quite as friable. But that was all that was available in my area. Another thing is that all I could get was I was able to get some cow manure. I was able to get some mushroom manure, and I had already started a worm bin because, you know, I'm a fisherman. I really love fishing, and so I had a small little worm bin that I was using as well, that I had built as well. And I believe that's right, or maybe I had ordered some worm castings or something like that, and I put that in there, and once again I pulled everything out that was dying and planted all over again, watered everything, and just everything sprouted up quickly, but just died. And it was just, I just almost gave up then. Really, I came very close to just saying, forget this, I'm just never going to be good at this, and I just almost gave up. But no. Dear old Mom was visiting one weekend, and I said, Mom, you got to help me, because, you know, Mom grew up on a cotton farm, and Grandma had a lot of land, and they grew. And back in those days, you know, we're talking 100 years ago, Grandma was born. No, wait a minute, let's see. I think she was born in 1896. I think that's right. And Sister Dortch, as everybody called her, and so she lived a great long time. But back in them days, everything was organic because that's all you had. You know, you didn't so much have. Of course, there were industrial methods being developed and even being used at that time. The thing was, it just wasn't. You just couldn't afford it. You know, you're very poor down here in the South, But Mom came up, looked at the garden, looked at what I had, and she saw the steer manure and then the peat moss and then the little vermiculite, and she says, "You need some fertilizer. All you've got is this, you know, horseman. All you got is this cow manure, and that's just not enough or whatever." And I thought, wait a minute, what? There's a difference between compost and fertilizer? I didn't know. I just thought they were all the same, you know, and so. And Mom, and you know, and Mom, dear old Mom, you know how Mom always is. She's always going to help you out. She's always going to try to help. And I come back home from work that day, and she had a big old box of, actually it was a small box of Miracle Grow. And I just said, thanks, Mom, but I never used it because I said, well, you know, I just got online and kind of, you know, you remember the episode about, you know, 6 kinds of gardeners. I kind of became a researcher and just kind of devoured everything I could on organic fertilizers. You know, looking up fertilizer in general, but the organic stuff is what kept fascinating me. I said, wait a minute, you know, and I began to realize that there's a lot of things that are simply just waste products that can actually be used as fertilizer in plant food. And so I went down and bought some things from the Farmers Co-op and various things like that, and put some things together. It took me a while to kind of get things to the right ratios and whatnot, because I didn't quite know what I was doing. But I remember planting that garden after I got that fertilizer in there. Everything sprouted, and it looked like everything was about to die, and I was frustrated again. And then after about 2 weeks, something dramatically changed. All of a sudden, it seemed like overnight, things started turning green. They started growing. They started getting stronger. And after about a month, I just never looked back, because it just never had a garden that was that plentiful, you know. And it was a result of that organic fertilizer recipe that you hear me talk about every single time, because that spelt the difference for me. And so that's basically was the start of the Greenhorn Gardening. And then once I had that little bit of success, I kind of turned into a little bit of a mad scientist and just started trying all kinds of things. And eventually, like this show talking about kale, I remember that autumn, kale was one of the things that I had grown, and I had no idea you could grow stuff in autumn and have a garden that could go all winter long, because it was just so fun. I said, why stop now? Just because it's, you know, October, why can't I just extend this thing on all throughout the year, you know? And so that's kind of what I did. And so I just became a kind of a mad scientist, and for a couple of 3 years, that's all I did was read everything I could get my hands on and test everything, and just was an insane researcher and mad scientist. And then I thought, again, I was thinking, well, what about my day job? What if I did lose that job again? I thought, well, maybe there may be some people who are interested in learning some of the things that I've learned, and discovering, and maybe can shortcut the process. So I put together the podcast, put together didn't do the YouTube videos until almost a year later, the ones that you see with the hat cam and whatnot. And then, let's see, and then had the blog and all that. And and eventually that has become what Greenhorn Gardening is today. It's just it's this ongoing kind of mad scientist, insane researcher and I'm just kind of sharing that information with you guys. And that's really what most of Greenhorn Gardening is, because that's the whole point. It's Greenhorn Gardening, the meaning of greenhorn being a beginner, somewhat naive, newcomer to a new land, so Greenhorn is, because in a lot of ways I am the greenhorn. In a lot of ways, a lot of you are the greenhorns, and we're all kind of greenhorns trying to garden and do this thing. And the only thing we're doing is just kind of sharing with each other and trying to figure things out. And that's essentially what Greenhorn Gardening is and was all about. That's why it's on the mission to help you start your own vegetable garden. And where we are today right now is that Greenhorn Gardening, it's getting bigger. It's getting, a lot. This is episode 77. It's only been 3 years or so. And we've got over 120 videos on YouTube and over 3,000 tweets on Twitter, and I don't know how many blog posts and things like that. And so this thing is getting bigger. It's getting bigger and it's expanding. And so I really, need to bring in some revenue. And that's part of where we are right now, is just trying to, come up with some ideas on things that we could do but I don't want to just be pitching products like you always hear me saying. What I really want to do is share things with you guys, and you guys tell me what, and I can kind of go out and I'm always going to be researching, doing the whole mad scientist thing anyway. Why not just put some of that in a nice package that can actually help you guys with your gardening? And so that's essentially the story of Greenhorn Gardening. And so and I kind of thought about this because I had a lady friend who asked me about growing kale, and it kind of got me thinking, man, kale was one of those first really successful things that I grew. Haven't grown it in a while, but I thought it just got me thinking. I figure maybe it'd be a good time to kind of share the Greenhorn Gardening story with you guys. And I tell you what, with that, let's jump on into the main subject. Okay, so 3 tips for growing kale. It's probably going to be more than 3 tips, but the thing is, I had a lady friend who asked me about growing kale. She said she just loved eating it, and tell you a quick story about kale. And my mom, I was talking about my mom a while ago, and Mom was asking my mom about kale one time. She says, kale, that's the stuff we used to grow to feed the hogs, because kale is kind of hard to digest, and they used to feed the hogs with it. And so, but anyway, I had a lady friend of mine who just loved kale and was asking me for some tips on kale. And so I says, well, hey, why not just go ahead and do a show on it? Because a lot of times with growing and eating greens, if you can grow one kind, you can grow the rest of them. Okay, if you can grow kale, you can grow just about everything else in the cabbage family, because that's the first thing. Is kale is a cabbage plant. It comes from it's the cabbage family. I'm not going to even try to pronounce the binomial name here, but it's in the cabbage family. So if you can grow collard greens or cabbage or broccoli or any of those kinds of things, and kale is more or less the same kind of thing. And that's just how I think about it. When someone asks me kale, I just think, okay, cabbage family. I just do the same things. There may be some particulars to that particular plant because of its size or shape or whatever, but that's the main thing. Is I think about the family, and I think once I identify the family, it's easy to move on into it. So with that said, if it's in the cabbage family, but they would done like a cabbage. But just like with lettuces, lettuces, you have head lettuce and you have loosely head lettuce, and you got leaf lettuce, and kale is a kind of leaf cabbage, and so it's kind of like collard greens. So kale and collard greens and mustard greens, they all kind of grow well together because they're all in the same family. And I'll give you a quick thing here. I shot this question out on Twitter that a few days ago that, hey, I had a lady friend who was asked about kale, and I asked, hey, anybody have any tips? And I got a couple people. Woolly Pocket on Twitter, she mentioned that direct seeding is best in the fall and transplanting is best in spring. And that's her hashtag was vertical gardens there. And then Blake Young on Twitter, I guess it's Flower Grower One. He said, watch out for cabbage worms. Again, right? It's a cabbage, so whatever diseases and things that you got to worry about with cabbage, well, you probably have to worry about those same things with kale. And so that's kind of the basis for that. One of the things you want to do anytime you want to grow a new plant is go look for some cultural information. Remember last week I was asking Darla about the huge library of cultural information that they have. So go on over to southernexposure.com. You can type in kale. They have a nice growing greens cultural notes, and kale is one of those things. I found another one on let's see where we can find. I think it was on Bonnie's website, which is a local here in Alabama. I think that's owned by the farmers. I think it's somehow associated with the farmers co-ops and whatnot here. Let me type that in. And so, and that's another one good. But you can just say growing kale. Just Google that, and you can get a whole lot of information on that. And that's the one thing you want to do. Now, my experience with kale is when I grew it the first time, it was in the autumn. And generally, with my cabbage family plants, I much rather grow those in autumn. Typically, you can grow them in spring, but like she says, it's way better to seed them up and then transplant them in the autumn. Just go ahead and put them in the ground, or late summer, autumn, whenever you want to do. Okay, that's the best thing. Okay, let's see where else. Where were we? Just looking at Southern Exposure's website, they're talking about pests. Has fewer pests than other cabbage style families, and and also too, you harvest the leaves just about any time. Typically, here's the thing about these kinds of green leafy things. Excuse me, hit the microphone. You need to plant them. It needs to be planted in the cool of the year. Don't go out trying to plant this in the middle of the summer, especially down here in this Alabama summer. They need to be grown in the cool of the year, which down here in Alabama, that means you need to be planting these things in a few weeks, all right? Because by the time April gets here, it's just going to be hot, and it's always, summer gets here in around April, okay? So you really need to be planting them like now or within the next couple of weeks to take advantage of the somewhat cool weather that we're having down here. It's just not, there's boiling, absolutely miserably hot, and then there's not so hot. Those are the two seasons that exist in Alabama, okay? Especially here in kind of central and especially in southern Alabama. It's, oh my gosh. But that's just kind of how it is. So, you can sow them in the summer. They will sprout kind of in late summer, and that'll be great for a fall harvest, and something that can be ready for the frost. And the great thing about these kinds of plants is that they seem to, I'm trying to think here, they seem to sprout better in warm weather, and then they mature in cool weather. Well, those conditions really only exist during autumn, right? A lot of people plant them in spring, but you end up having to plant them indoors before the last frost, and then you're having to, but a lot of times what I'll do is just, I'll just go ahead and plant them out there about the same time I'll get my lettuces out there, and that's usually how it works well for me. And so, so those are a few tips there. Let's see, what else can we think about? He's talking about the. So that's my experience with that. That's the seeding. You can transplant them, or you can plant them directly into the soil as well during the spring, but just try to wait until it gets closer to your last frost. It doesn't have to be as, once these things start sprouting, they actually grow fairly well, especially once the planet starts tilting more forward. Now, as far as the cabbage worms go, I tell you what, let me pause the microphone here, and I'm going to go get this bottle of spinosad, I think it was, and I'm going to kind of read that to you. I'm going to pause right now, and I'll be right back in a few seconds. Okay, so I'm back, and yeah, that's what it is. It's spinosad or spinosad. It's the Monterey insect spray. It is on the Armory list, and now for those of you who don't know, Armory is the, it's the Organic Materials Review Institute, and they review different materials and things that are kind of certified or approved for organic gardening methods or farming methods, and so it's for organic production. It's a now I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's for control of foliage feeding worms, caterpillars, thrips, leaf miners, and other listed pests. Now, I have never used this particular product before, but I do plan on using it this spring if needed. And so for those of you who are worried about the cabbage worms and things like that, check that out, Monterey Insect Spray. I'm going to give that a shot, and I'll just probably let you know as time goes on throughout the growing season. So I said I was going to give you 3 tips. I actually just kind of babbled. So on the one hand, you've got the seeding. Okay, if you're going to wait until autumn, go ahead and sow it in late autumn, and you get where you can kind of overwinter it. You can pick on the leaves. If you're going to spring plant it, just wait until, I don't know, a couple of weeks or so before your last frost dates, and go ahead and get them out there in the garden. I usually just direct seed these things, and like I say, my experience really is just almost exclusively, well, it is, I've only grown them in the autumn because that's when I grow my cabbage plants, is in the autumn. I don't even try to fool with it during the spring. I just rather do lettuces in the spring and then do cabbages in the autumn. That's just how I do things. And then also too, with the pests, you want to check out the either BT or spinosad, or this Monterey Garden Insect Spray, and that those are my many blabberings on growing kale. Okay, so here's some seed storage tips for where you can store them and how you can store them. One, I just store them in the freezer. Some people do it in the refrigerator, but either way, the only downside with either one of those is that it can be moist in your refrigerator. So, and one thing you don't want is for your seeds to get any kind of moisture in them. But in general, if I just keep them in the freezer, they're okay. I mean, a lot of people may not know that, but think about it, a lot of seeds have to survive winter outside all the time, yet the planet never fails to turn green in the spring, correct? And so the same thing here. You can just put them in the freezer. Now, the way I organize my seeds is I just get envelopes, big envelopes, your big kind of manila kind of envelopes, and I mark, spring, I mark summer, autumn, winter, just essentially the general season that plant grows well in, and that's where I put that. And then when it comes time to plant, I just pull that out. Okay, these are the things I'm going to plant this spring. Bam. These are the things I'm going to plant this autumn. Bam. This is when I'm going to do it. And then you can just kind of chart it out from there. And so that's my seed storage tip. I had a video on that I did probably a year ago. I'll see if I can hunt that up on YouTube and put a link to that in the show notes. And that is this week's growing tip. If you want to supercharge your garden's growth, get your organic fertilizer recipe download at greenhorngardening.com/claim. That's it for this time. See you guys later. Grow 'em big.